Hey guys, welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Shivan and I'm a first year medical student at King's College London. I also make YouTube videos about medical school and university and basically just things like that. As I said before, I study at King's College London, and London is one of the most happening and busiest cities in the world. It's one of the best places to be. Its life here is so vibrant and it's just a great place to live as a student. But along with all of that, it's a very expensive city as well. And if you're coming here to study as in university, you'll obviously need to consider your finances, your expenditure, and things like that. That's why I made today's video about what would be the cost of living as a student in London. I'm going to cover everything I can, and I'm basically going to go over what expenditure in a month looks like in London and how much it can vary from person to person, because obviously not each person is going to spend the same amount of money per month. And yeah, I'm just going to talk about that. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. But before I begin, I want to remind you guys to check out my channel if you haven't already. Check out some of my videos, watch this video. If you like it, hit that subscribe button and follow me for all the new videos I'm going to be putting out. So let's get into this video now. I'm going to be discussing all this from a point of view of a student who's obviously looking to make their costs as efficient as possible and who's not looking to spend a lot of extra money. So this is going to be something that's quite realistic if you're a student who's conscious of your money. So the cost of living in London. I'm going to begin by going through some of the biggest costs that will be there in London, and those are your tuition fees and your rent/accommodation fees. So those are your two fixed big sort of costs. First, I'm gonna go over your tuition fees. So obviously, if you're a student in the UK, you're gonna be paying the standard £9,250 for your fees, no matter your degree, your course, doesn't matter. That's your costs, and that's pretty standard. An international student, you'll be paying somewhere between the range of £20,000 to £40,000 a year for your tuition fees. So £20,000 to £30,000 is usually the cost per year for any BSc degree, but a degree like medicine is £40,000 a year for an international student because it costs extra to train medical students. Next big cost is your rent/accommodation fees. Those are also big costs that you'll be paying in big chunks throughout the year. So here I'm going to talk about that weekly because that's generally how you will see accommodation fees pop up. Accommodation fees in London, if you're a student accom, it's usually somewhere between £200 to £400 a week. That's the standard amount. You can find few places that are below £200. For example, there's one place in King's, Wolfson House, that's £170 if I'm not wrong, or something like that. And obviously each university might have one that costs about that much. And there's certain accommodations that cost more than £400, but again, those are rare. You're not really going to find many of student accommodations that cost more than £400. So that's generally the range, and yeah, that's what you'll be paying if you're living in student accommodation. If you're renting a flat, like probably sharing with someone, obviously it's less expensive if you're sharing the flat with more people. So that usually ranges from somewhere between £120 to £300. £120 to £300 is generally the range. Again, you can find flats for way more than that. And if you're probably looking for a flat that's around £120 a week, then you're probably going to be sharing with someone, first of all, definitely, and you're going to be living in not a very central area. It's when you go further out in the probably zone 2 and 3 that you'll find flats that offer around 120. So those are your main big fixed costs that you'll be paying throughout the year, your tuition fees and your rent/accommodation fees. Next, let's move up the monthly breakup of all your other costs. So now we're going to figure out basically how much it costs to live in London per month. Obviously, I'm not saying you cannot spend more than this, but this is generally, I'm talking more about the realistic amount that a student would spend, and the minimum. It's not like you can't use more money here, but like obviously as a student you'd be wanting to use as less money as possible. So let's begin. First of all, you have your fixed costs in your monthly expenditure as well. For example, if you're living in a flat that you're renting on your own, that's not student accommodation, you'll probably be paying bills. You'll be paying bills for water, electricity, rent, things like that. And those are usually around 40 to 60 pounds per month per person. So on top of that, you'll have to pay your phone bills, you'll have to pay for any subscriptions you have. If you go to a gym, you'll have to pay monthly for that as well. So all of that will make up your fixed costs. And I'd put fixed costs, the total amount, at somewhere between 60 to 120 pounds if you're living in a rented flat. And if you're living in student accommodation, it'll probably be between 20 and 60. On top of that, you have your travel costs. Travel costs are a very important expense in London because obviously as a student, you're not traveling in a car here because the city is not designed to be comfortably used by cars. You have to take public transport, or you have to, take an Uber or a cab or something, which most students generally don't do, but you might have to use that sometimes. So if I'm talking about transportation costs, this is very variable. This depends on where you stay. So for example, if you stay very close to your campus and your friends and wherever you have to travel, you'll probably not spend that much on travel per month because you're not spending on travel daily. But if you do live kind of far away from where you study and you live a certain distance away from other people you meet often, you'll obviously be spending a lot more on travel per month. So basically, a two-way tube journey in London costs around £5, depending on, that's again variable depending on which zones you're traveling through, and a bus costs £1.50 to tap in, and you can tap in as many times in 1 hour. Your travel costs can vary from 20 to £150 a month. For example, if you take a lot of Ubers, and if you take a train to go somewhere, for example, I have to go to placement, that's quite far away, quite far outside London once a week. That costs me £13 every time I go, so that builds up to quite a big travel expense. So that's why your travel expenses can vary between 20 and £150. The next thing you have is groceries. So groceries are another massive cost. I'd say this could potentially be where most of your expenditure happens if you're a student who's planning to cook, and that's something I would recommend. Be a student who cooks because it's healthier, it is cheaper than eating out all the time, and it's just a much smarter decision. Cooking is so much fun as well. You can cook with your flatmates, you can cook with your friends, it's really fun. But yeah, so groceries really accumulate a big expense, especially if you're a non-vegetarian. But it depends on things like if you're vegetarian, if you're non-vegetarian, how much you eat. Like for example, I eat a lot, but I know some people who eat very little. So your general costs for groceries will probably be between 100 and 250 pounds, maybe even 300. Let's put that as 100 to 300 pounds, because things like meat, they cost like 2 to 3 pounds for a serving of meat, and like you constantly be having to buy milk, eggs, things throughout the month if you eat in quite often. And obviously there are a few sort of groceries that might cost a fair bit of money as well. So yeah, your grocery costs can accumulate a lot. There was one point where I was having to go grocery shopping many times a week because I was eating home all the time. I was eating at home all the time during lockdown, and I was just going to Sainsbury's all the time. The next expense we have is eating out, nights out, things like that. So what you spend on food, what you spend on drinks, things like that. So food, eating out, again, very expensive in London. So generally, if you eat out and you don't really think about what you're ordering when you eat out, I'm not saying you go to fancy restaurants, but you go to normal restaurants and you order whatever you like on the menu, you'll generally end up spending 10 to 12 pounds at least at a restaurant. And ordering in is very expensive. That is, I think it's literally the most financially unwise decision to order in when you don't need to, because it can be so expensive sometimes without any deals or anything. Delivery costs, service costs, things like that, it really builds up to a lot. So eating out can be really expensive. So I put your eating out costs, and obviously then it depends on how often you eat out and you go out on nights out. Drinking obviously costs a lot of money. I'd say I'd put your monthly expenses for eating out and drinking as 50 to 200 pounds. So if you're someone 50, you're looking at someone who doesn't really eat out at all. You'll probably still end up going out a few times a month, even if you're someone who doesn't like eating out, because that's a massive way of socializing in this city. And obviously generally around the world as well, eating out is a big thing. And then you're looking at 200 if you're someone who eats out a lot, like eats out every day at least once. Then you're actually probably looking at more than 200, but I'm saying 200 to be conservative. If you're looking at someone who eats out probably 15-20 times a month, and if you're looking at someone who drinks and eats out a lot, this expense could tank your whole budget or whatever you're planning to spend, because this is really the most expensive thing and it's really where you can lose control. So you'd want to be most careful in this area with eating out and nights out, because obviously as students, when we think about how much money we're spending and why we have to be careful, what is a student going to spend on? Where is a student going to lose their money? It's on this eating out and going out. That's what costs money, and that's what's so tempting. So yeah, I actually put that around between 50 and 250 pounds. So that's the range. And lastly, we have extra expenses. So extra expenses, let me give you a few examples of extra expenses. Give me a second. If I look at some of my extra expenses, they're things like buying a gift for a friend's birthday, buying some sort of educational subscription or something like that. Like I bought a subscription to PassMed, then buying any sort of like educational resources online, to buy tickets to events, society things in university. Then if you ever have to buy medicines and things like that, that could be a potential extra cost. And then let's see, we have, if you are planning to go clubbing, the ticket for clubbing is obviously another extra expense. For example, if you need any stuff for your house or for your room, anything like that, that'll all go under extra expenses. And extra expenses, again, super variable. But if we're talking about smaller extra expenses, it's usually in the range of 25 to 50 pounds a month. Your extra expenses could be more than that. Like, it really depends. For example, if one month you're buying a desk, let's say, that could be 120 pounds extra that you weren't planning to spend that month. So when we're talking about extra expenses, you don't know what to expect and there's no way to really budget that. But if you're looking at the smaller ones, you'd keep a range of 25 to 50 pounds a month. And basically, I think that covers everything for how much you would spend in a month in London, and that really covers both sides of the coin, the whole range of possible expenditures, and you can place yourself wherever you think you will be according to your lifestyle and your habits. Whether you travel a lot, whether you eat out a lot, whether you cook at home, things like that, you can use it to decide where you stand on this sort of spectrum. So now let's add everything together, and I will give you what your monthly expenditure will look like if you're coming to London as a student. You'll be looking to spend somewhere between 215 and 870 pounds a month. So like I said, it's a massive range, and it depends on what lifestyle you're living, what type of person you are. It depends on the smallest things like your appetite up to where you live. All of that will affect how much you spend in a month, and that is the range. Don't confine yourself to this. I don't think you can spend less than 215 pounds, but obviously there must be some people out there who do it. And if you're spending more than 870, then that's obviously fine too. This is just a realistic sort of range that I'm giving you according to my experiences and experiences of people I know. And yeah, that really seems to cover everything, I think. And I hope it's helpful. And if you're coming to study in London, considering to come and study in London, I hope this sort of gives you an insight into what spending in the city looks like. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment down below on this video, and drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you like this video. And I will be putting out a lot more videos that hopefully you like as well, and I'll basically see you in the next one.